Welcome to Deck Analysis and Testing. Today we have a look at Dark Magician Buster Blader. Remember when Dark Paladin got a skill so terrible that everybody forgot about it after a day it's released? So this new skill is basically that, but better. Well, at least they tried. It's like Battle Chronicle, where it lets you normal summon Dark Magicians and get a free search every time you do that. But instead of searching good cards like, Successor Soul, we're getting a Poly and Diffusion Wave Motion. So essentially we're still playing a Dark Magician deck that can occasionally make fusion monsters that are okay, I guess. Okay, so let's have a look at the skill first, because most of the cards in this deck is pretty known for being in most Dark Magician decks anyway. So the new skill says you can only use it for second and third effects once per duel. You cannot special summon level 2 or higher monsters, except for level 6 or higher Dark Spellcasters and Buster Blader monsters. But you can normal summon or set Dark Magician and Buster Blader without tributing. Okay, so the once per duel effects are shuffle one card from your hand to your deck, reveal a Dark Magician in your hand, and then play a Buster Blader from your hand or deck to your field in the face down defense position. And you can change its battle position during the turn it's summoned. And the second effect, I guess the third one technically, during the turn that you normal summoned Dark Magician, you can add a Poly and a Diffusion Wave Motion from outside your deck to your hand. Both of these cards are not very good, but Diffusion Wave Motion is useful sometimes if you go second. But usually if you go first, or even sometimes when you go second, you just want to have it as a free discard fodder for your fusion monsters, which for some reason a lot of your fusions need to discard. So there's that. Anyway, let's go over the deck. I'm sure you should be familiar with most of the stuff in this deck because it's just usual Dark Magician stuff. We have 3 copies of Dark Magician, which is a vanilla. We have 1 copy of Buster Blader, which might as well be a vanilla. We have 1 copy of Apprentice, which can summon itself by discarding 1 and also searches a Dark Magician, and also has a pretty useful effect of boosting your attack. For spells, we have 3 Summoner's Art, which searches Dark Magician. We have 1 Dark Magical Circle, which potentially searches Dark Magician or Eternal Soul, and also has a pretty useful effect to banish a card every time you summon a Dark Magician. We have 1 Piercing the Darkness, which boosts your attack of your Dark Magicians or your fusion monsters if you use Dark Magician as the material, and also gives you a free draw every time you summon Dark Magician. We have 2 copies of Fusion Recovery, which now is no longer a structure deck exclusive, so anyone can get multiple copies of this card, and it's pretty useful just as a +1, because just gets you more discard fodder for your fusions, or you can potentially make a second fusion if you have enough gas in your hand if you go second. For the traps, we have 2 copies of Eternal Soul, summons a Dark Magician every turn from your hand or graveyard, also makes all of your Dark Magicians unaffected by anything. It's pretty good until you read the last line, which destroys your entire field when this card leaves the field in any way, except to the deck, because the deck is a hidden information zone, and Rulings says that it does not trigger its effect. So if it's destroyed, banished, sent back to the hand, yeah, it still triggers the effect and pops your entire field. For the other traps, we're just playing generic stuff. We're playing 2 copies of Horror House, 2 copies of Cloak and Dagger, 2 copies of Time Space Trap Hole. These cards are good going first, and if you're going second, you can just use them as a discard fodder. For the extra deck, we're playing 2 copies of Dark Paladin. You can get 1 from the structure deck and 1 for free. We can have a copy of Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. It's technically optional. It's really good against dragon decks, but useless against any other deck. You can get that from a pickup box that is up right now. 1 copy of Dark Cavalry, which is a really useful monster that can discard 1 to negate a targeting effect. It's not once per turn, and it also works if your opponent targets their own cards, and that does come up a lot of times. We have a copy of Dark Magicians, which you rarely summon, but if you do, it's a free draw every time you activate a spell trap. And you won't be able to use its floating effect because we're not playing Dark Magician Girl, but if you are playing Dark Magician Girl, you can summon 2 guys for free when it is destroyed. Playing one rank 7 Xyz, Ebon Illusion is a pretty good one that can let you summon Dark Magicians from your deck and also banish stuff when your Dark Magician attacks. We have M-Duck just as a Link 1 Dragon to link off our Dark Magicians to get more targets for Eternal Soul, or to get a dragon for fusion material for Buster Blader, and we just have a link to generic Pentastag for generic reasons. Okay, let's have a look at the expensive version of the deck. We're just adding more copies of the Ultra Rares in the main deck, 3 copies of Apprentice Illusion, 3 copies of Dark Magical Circle, just probably the 2 best cards in the deck, and 3 copies of Crackdown as our generic staple trap of choice. And the rest of the deck is pretty much the same. The extra deck is pretty much the same. We're just playing Big Eye as another rank 7 that's good going second, and Nightmare Phoenix instead of Pentastag for our generic Link 2. Okay, let's jump straight into the replays. There's not too much to talk about in the deck profile, so let's have a look at what this deck can do. This deck is kinda okay going second, but preferably want to go first. Honestly, this deck is just not very good either way, but going first, at least we can make use of the generic traps that we are playing. We're gonna use the skill to shuffle back the Dark Magician and reveal the other Dark Magician to get a free Buster Blader. And then we're just gonna normal summon the Dark Magician and get a free Poly and a free Diffusion Wave Motion. But because we're going first, we're just gonna use a Wave Motion as a discard fodder for our fusion. And since we know our opponent is playing Raging Pendulum, we're just gonna make the spell negate, which is not once per turn. So every time they activate a Pendulum Scale, we can just negate the Pendulum Scale and prevent them from ever being able to Pendulum Summon. Opponent will Pendulum Call, discard 1, we'll negate the Pendulum Call. And we kind of have to do that because Pendulum Call prevents them from their scales from being destroyed. He's going to activate another Pendulum Call, we're going to negate that as well. And then with 1 card left in hand, he's going to end his turn. But we still won't be able to win yet because he has a Kite Roid in the graveyard. We're going to attack with Dark Magician and get a free draw with Piercing the Darkness when it's summoned. We're going to use up his Kite Roid, he's going to try to activate his scale, we just negate that again. Wow, what a fun and interactive game when your deck does what it does. Yep, so we're just gonna draw another card and just attack full game. Wow, what a fun game, am I right? Okay, let's have a look at the second game. Well, obviously, things don't always go out as you wish they would, and not everybody would play their entire deck that is basically spell cards. And one example right here is Hakyon, which pretty much plays no spells and all monsters and a few trap cards. So our deck is going to be a lot less good against that. But we do have Dark Magical Circle and the Eternal Bond, so we can just do normal Dark Magician stuff. We can still use the skill, shuffling back a Fusion Recovery, and be able to summon a Buster Bleeder for free. We're gonna still use the skill to grab a Poly, and we're gonna make a Dark Cavalry this time because Dark Paladin is just not very good. We could make the Buster Blader because he is a dragon deck technically, but if he makes Dingirsu, it's really bad for us anyway, so... And Dingirsu is not a dragon. He's gonna summon 2 monsters. We're gonna try to use Dark Magical Circle to banish their normal summon. They're gonna Forbidden Lands. We can actually negate his lands because it does target a monster. But then our opponent has the Cosmic, it banishes our Eternal Soul, pops our entire field, and we basically lose on the spot. Opponent has Nebula Dragon plus another level 8. We might as well just scoop right there. Okay, now that you know why the deck isn't good, let's see if the expensive version can at least help us not lose as hard against some other decks. We open okay. We have 3 Dark Magicians, but we can still at least make a fusion. And we do have an Eternal Soul, but unfortunately we didn't draw the Dark Magical Circle, so it just summons Dark Magicians and does nothing else pretty much. Okay, we're gonna skip a bit ahead, and we have a Dark Cavalry, which is good in most cases because we actually don't know what our opponent is playing. So just as a safe option, it's always good to make Dark Cavalry. Opponent turns out to be playing Tenyi, and they usually can remove cards on the field 2 times, and we have 2 cards in hand, so we can negate the Vishuda, and then negate the Baxia. And then that allows us to still have the Eternal Soul and a really big guy on the field, which they have trouble outing. We're gonna negate the Baxia, as I said, but they still have ways to actually get rid of the Dark Cavalry in the form of the Link 2, because the Link 2 has an effect whenever a non-effective monster battles, it gets to pop a card on the field. So they are going to try to do that, but at least we still have the Eternal Soul on our side, which might be able to just carry us all the way. Opponent will pop our Fusion, we're gonna flip up Eternal Soul, summoning back a Dark Magician. He tries to use the Blue Dragon to pop our Dark Magician, but unfortunately it's just not affected by anything. I know, right? Reading is hard. We're gonna summon back another Dark Magician in our turn to make a rank 7 E1 to try to banish the Link 2. And unfortunately the Link 2 will be able to pop our monster. It's probably better to pop the trap. I don't know why they didn't do that. Again, probably they didn't read. Opponent will use Vishuda to bounce back the Eternal Soul. We can, I guess, summon back a Dark Magician, but as I said in the intro, when the Eternal Soul is bounced back to the hand, it still pops your entire field. But at least we still have the Eternal Soul for next turn. We're gonna activate Dark Magical Circle, getting nothing to our hand, but at least we can change the order of the deck, and we know what card we're gonna draw next. Our opponent will bounce back the Dark Magical Circle. I don't know why they didn't wait for the Eternal Soul. We're gonna crack down and steal their Ashuna, preventing them from making any Link monsters, and then we can just draw the Fusion Recovery off the top that we already know is in our top deck, grab back the Buster Blader and the Poly, and our opponent will scoop. Man, these players, man.